You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis. I'm your host for BioTalk. And we have a very interesting couple of guests today, which is unusual. We normally do individuals, but we have two from Linshom Medical. And their catchphrase is every breath counts. And we're going to find out why every breath counts from Linshom in this edition of BioTalk. And we have Ric Hughen, who is the CEO of Linshom. And this is a repeat performance for Ric. Welcome back to BioTalk, Ric.
Thanks.
And he decided to bring someone who is very important because Ric was not able to present at our crab trap competition at the 10th Annual BioHealth Capital Region week in September. So he asked Talia Feldman, who's a software engineer at Linshom, to present for him. And guess what? She won. Congratulations, Talia, and welcome to BioTalk.
Thank you.
You had some stiff competition, but I'll tell you what, you had the best presentation of any of those seasoned CEOs you were competing against. How about that? We're going to learn more about that today. So Ric did a great job in hiring Talia and also having her represent the company at the crab trap competition. So welcome to both of you. And we're going to learn more about the progress you've made in the last couple of years since the last time you were on BioTalk, and also talk about the recent success you've had in winning the crab trap. But before we start, I think it's best that both of you introduce yourselves rather than me introduce each of you to the listeners. So we're going to start with Ric. And Ric, if you don't mind, give a little brief introduction to yourself and background for the BioTalk listeners.
Sure, thanks. So I worked at corporate giants like Abbott, J&J, and BD for the first half of my career, whole host of jobs, and then moved into the startup world around 2000 with a company called Learnware. We took a license to content out of the continuing medical education office out of Johns Hopkins. And we built that company up. It was sold to a private equity firm and then joined CSA Medical, another startup, in 2006. And that GI business was sold to Steris in 2019. So then in 2018, Tedco introduced me to Linshom Medical, who needed a business lead. And here we are today, 5 years later.
Well, congratulations on 5 years, which is the average tenure for when a company lives or dies, generally in the startup world. So you have succeeded in living and prospering and growing. So congrats. And then Talia Feldman is going to tell us what a software engineer is at Linshom Medical and how you got to that point, Talia.
Hi, I'm Talia. I'm a software engineer at Linshom Medical. So my journey into tech began with a fascination in medicine and a passion for math and problem solving. So put those interests together and it's a perfect fit for a software engineer. Today, I get to combine my skills to develop innovative technology with really exciting data. And this has been very rewarding at Linshom. So I'm excited to share more about the work that we've been doing. And thanks for having us on.
Well, tell us a little bit about your academic background that trained you to be a software engineer, Talia.
So I got a computer science degree from the University of Delaware, and I also had a concentration in my major, and the concentration was focused in artificial intelligence. So I've really applied those skills in artificial intelligence to bring that to Linshom, which you'll probably hear throughout today. Most of my work is really around our data and our data analysis and powering our algorithms.
Thank you for that intro. We'll learn more about what you do specifically. But Ric's going to reintroduce us to Linshom and basically to our audience. And you're trying to improve patient safety through innovative respiratory monitoring technology. So what does that really mean? Talk about the evolution of the company, where you are with the technology today.
Sure. So we're first to deliver an operating room quality respiratory monitor data set to the patient bedside with a wearable FDA cleared sensor. The problem today is respiratory monitoring is completely responsive. It alerts when the patient is already in trouble. The decline has happened. our sensor can detect respiratory decline coming. It can predict it and identify before the patient is in trouble. So at that point in time, the interventions for the healthcare team are almost free. There's simple things like wake up, Mr. Jones, or a jaw thrust, a little more supplemental oxygen. In the emergency room, an inexpensive shot of Narcan for an opioid overdose. This compares to if you're in the current paradigm where it's late responsive action, those interventions are really expensive. You're talking about rapid response activations, rescue events, or codes, intensive care unit transfers, and sometimes patient death. So by identifying it early, predicting it, we can head it off.
Talk a little bit about the technology that's used in this treatment here, Ric.
Sure. So it's a small, inexpensive, wearable thermal sensor. So we're detecting temperature change. When you exhale, you heat it. When you inhale, you cool it. And we take 10 readings per second, and we're measuring the delta or the change from each reading to each reading. And that gives us a crystal clear respiratory signature similar to what you would get in the operating room with a tube down your throat.
Oh, interesting. So basically, you're talking about this is an unmet need that exists within the medical profession today. Talk about sort of the gaps that exist, what technologies are used today, and why you are better and differentiated from what's in the market.
Sure. So healthcare providers have wanted this data for a long time, but the technology's just not been there to deliver it to the patient bedside. There's technology in the operating room called capnography, which is measuring the amount of CO2 you exhale, and it works great. It's very good technology, but it's not decentralizable to the patient bedside. A little too big, a little too expensive, a little too complex to get the respiratory monitoring to the bedside. The thing that is at the bedside that most of us are familiar with, certainly after COVID, is pulse oximetry, the finger monitor. And again, it's kind of ubiquitous in healthcare, but not only is it late, it's a delayed indicator. So it's alarming that your saturation, oxygen saturation in your capillaries in your finger are low, but that's 6 minutes, 7, 8 minutes after the events actually happened in your lungs and your airway. Our device is the equivalent of a flow meter, and we're identifying respiratory rate decline, tidal volume, or the volume of air you move with each breath, tidal volume decline instantly, the second it happens.
And is there a type of occurrence or disease where this happens more frequently with potential patients, Ric?
It happens in patients that like to breathe. That's a little snarky, but it's true. It crosses all patient boundaries. So everybody wants to keep breathing. Certainly, it's more relevant and more important for really sick patients, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic bronchitis, asthma, COVID, pneumonia, sepsis, RSV, the list goes on and on. And we are kind of ubiquitous to all conditions because everybody needs to breathe.
Got it. Talia, as one of the members of the engineering team for Linshom, talk a little bit about the evolution of the technology, some of the challenges that were encountered to get the technology to where it is today, and what improvements you see can still be made in it to actually improve the technology.
Yeah, sure. So previously, our device has been proven equivalent in respiratory rate and tidal volume to existing technologies, such as capnography, which Ric mentioned. But recently, we concluded a clinical study at Ohio State University, which produced a lot of data. And this created some new challenges for us. Now we have a large data set to mine and draw conclusions from for real-world patient data, which that's what drives the enhancement for our data product and our reliability. So on the other side of that data processing, I can say we've made a ton of discoveries from this incredibly valuable data set that has enhanced our product and actually has armed us with data to power new algorithms. One of these algorithms can be thought of as kind of a stability index, which will be able to provide healthcare professionals with objective data on patient stability. And this could lead to some patients staying longer and others being eligible for early discharge, which this objective data doesn't exist right now. I mean, there's a lot of different discharge criteria, but respiratory profile is a big component. So this could be a major data point for healthcare professionals.
And when you mentioned data and algorithms, I hear that a lot now when people are talking about artificial intelligence. Does AI play any role in your technology today or may in the future?
Yeah, so this stability algorithm, I think, is kind of textbook artificial intelligence, machine learning. What we've been able to develop is a customized algorithm per patient. So a person comes in, we don't need to know any prerequisite data about this patient. We have our sensor monitoring the patient, and we form a personalized algorithm to that patient to assess their risk factors and their stability. So we can be able to look at a window of time and tell the doctor or the nurses, this patient is deteriorating in respiration, this patient is improving, stable, and give those objective data points to get a better picture of the whole trend of a patient's respiratory profile.
And then from an engineering perspective, vertical integration is very interesting for a company and you have a little more control. How much of your software and hardware development can you do in-house versus how much do you have to contract with people outside of Linshom on your technology today?
So our hardware, we work with partners locally in Baltimore, and all of our software work is in-house. So that data processing, the new algorithms, that's all in-house engineering efforts that are currently undergoing. And we have a lot of new exciting development that's coming together pretty much by the end of the year on all of those fronts.
Some of which you probably can talk about and some which you can't talk about, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So Ric, I'm going to come to you then. What is it you can talk about and what is it that you can give a hint of what does the future look like on technology?
Sure. So we expect to have all the data pulled together in first quarter of 25 for a new submission to the FDA for FDA clearance. So our current device is FDA cleared today. We actually just got a second FDA clearance in September of this year. And we hope to get a third FDA clearance in the first half of next year. And that would be for a miniaturized version of our current sensor. And it's been cut down probably 10, 15%, down to 10 or 15% of the original size, so that we can now mount that sensor in a smaller form factor, a nasal cannula. And we're working with some industry partners on the sourcing of those products that we mount our sensors in. And that's just a critical next step for us to get that development complete, the testing done, and then that data set submitted to FDA for hopefully clearance around the middle of next year.
And then a lot of our listeners may or may not be familiar with FDA and their regulatory process. So you always hear about an FDA approval, and you're using the word clearance. Can you please tell people what clearance really gives you the ability to do from the FDA?
Sure. And it's a little more than just semantics. You hear the word approval for things like pharmaceuticals and vaccines. We're a medical device, so we go through, and those products go through the PMA, the pre-market authorization process. Medical devices typically don't. They go through what's called a 510K process. And the eventual outcome of that, the positive outcome of that, is called a clearance, which means you are cleared to sell or market your device. So that's really the difference. We're a class 2 medical device, which requires 510K clearance from the FDA.
Thank you very much. We're talking with Ric Hughen, who's the CEO of Linshom Medical, and Talia Feldman, software engineer at Linshom. And as you're trying to grow an emerging medical device company located in the BioHealth Capital Region, sometimes the biggest challenge for the CEO is raising capital to keep the thing going. I know that Linshom's had a history in both looking at non-dilutive, which means you don't have to give up equity in your company, as well as potentially equity funding where you actually sell shares in your company. Talk a little bit about your financing strategy and successes in both areas, both the non-dilutive and the equity side of raising capital for Linshom, Ric.
Yeah, despite the current nuclear winter in financing that's going on now in the last 2-ish years, we've done pretty well. So after founder money, we won a phase 1 and 2 SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research Grant, from the U.S. Air Force. And then we overlap that funding with a convertible note, which is really a debt instrument that converts to stock at a future date. And then from that, we overlap that funding with a win, a large grant win, $2.5 million, another SBIR from National Institutes of Health, the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute within NIH. And actually, BHI helped us with this grant submission and was instrumental in that win. We would not have won that grant without that assistance from BHI.
I think I'm going to clip that little testimonial out of this here, Ric. So thank you.
Have at it. And then we overlap that funding with our Series A preferred round. So I think the key that you heard here a couple times is the word overlap. And without overlap, you're going to have a gap, you're going to run out of money, and you're going to have to either slow or stop or terminate. And the key is to get all of those instruments to flow in harmony together.
And basically, a CEO's job in raising capital never ends. They basically use a term ABR, which is always be raising. So even though you've gotten your Series A, are you currently raising capital again for beyond Series A and for future growth?
So we're still in the A. We're in our Series A. It's a $3 million A, and we've raised 1.8 of that. So there's 1.2 open. So if you're listening and you're looking for a great place to invest, this is it. But you want to strike now before it passes you by. But yes, we are ABR. And as soon as this A closes, we have developed a large pool of very interested investors that are just waiting for that first revenue event to then come in. And that would likely be a small Series B.
Maryland has numerous programs to assist early stage businesses. And I'm just wondering, are there other programs you've taken advantage of, like TEDCO or the Biotechnology Investor Tax Credit Program in Maryland in your raising, Ric?
Yeah, we're very, very fortunate to be in this ecosystem. It's critical to where we've been. So we've had equity investments from the ABLE Foundation, the Maryland Momentum Fund, and more than one, a couple from TEDCO along the way, along with the BHI support I mentioned earlier. We've also had support from MIPS, or Maryland Industrial Partnerships, to conduct a study at the University of Maryland Medical Center, as well as support from the Department of Commerce, who has funded our attendance at some of the national meetings that are critical to our presence, visibility, and success. We have not used the biotech investment tax credit yet, but we are currently in the application process and hope to be able to use it in 2025.
Super. Well, you've just mentioned a number of reasons why a company should choose Baltimore and Maryland and the BioHealth Capital Region as a location to grow your business based on the support that's available to you. And then Talia was talking about utilizing vendors right in our backyard there in Baltimore to help support some of the things that are being done. So Talia, talk a little bit about the benefits of what you see as to being located in Maryland and the BioHealth Capital Region for everything you're trying to do from a technology development standpoint.
Absolutely. So we work with Harbor Design, which is a engineering and manufacturing firm in Baltimore. And being in a close proximity, it's always better to be able to meet in person and work things out hands-on. So that's been a huge asset, having them so close. Also, just working through different prototypes, or if we have issues and need to troubleshoot, being so close physically has been very, very helpful. We're also in the midst of a clinical study at University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore. So really, Baltimore is kind of our hub right now, a lot going on, and It's very accessible and a huge network of people. I think every time Ric or I goes into University of Maryland, we run into other people that we know, and it's just a super helpful network of people.
How about the recruitment of people to the company as you're looking to grow the company? How has this region been for adding additional staff to Linshom right from the Maryland area, Ric?
Yeah, we haven't hit that spike yet where we've had to ramp up and recruit a lot of people. So we are pretty static where we're at right now. I anticipate that we'll need a manufacturing engineer mid to late next year, and that'll take our kind of small team of 5 up to 6. So we're pretty svelte and pretty efficient with what we do.
Yeah, that's called lean. So basically, you're practicing lean growth and lean management, and it's working well. And so I think a lot of people sometimes try to get ahead of themselves. They raise a little bit of capital, bring on a whole bunch of people, and then they realize at the end that they have too much overhead that they really can't support. So a lot of that's done through the partnerships that you have formed, and that having the people in your backyard to support you, I think, is one of the benefits of being in that Baltimore area in the medical device field, because Baltimore is emerging as a nice little medical device cluster for companies like yourself, Ric. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It sure is. I recently attended a meeting, the AdvaMed MedTech meeting, which this year was in Toronto. And it's an annual meeting, and it's kind of the MedTech meeting of the year. And it was very interesting to see just the not dominant presence, but the very significant presence of the BioHealth Capital Region area, whether it be Maryland, Baltimore, Virginia, DC, Western Maryland, companies from all of those areas, a lot of a couple dozen represented at this MedTech meeting. So you could see kind of this physical presence, which hasn't been there in the past.
Well, that's great to see that we're getting that visibility to educate people about the opportunities that reside here, and also the ability to grow your business here in this region too. So I'm going to revert back to Talia a second, because she had a first-time experience as a presenter competing. Basically the crab trap competition this year had about 62 entries, and we selected the top 5 to present in front of a number of different judges, which were very prominent. We had JP Morgan there, Alexandria Real Estate Equities, and TEDCO, Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, JLabs. So it was really good visibility for the people and the companies that were presenting. So Talia, I'd like to ask you, as a first-time presenter at a pitch competition like this, what was the experience like for you?
It was a really great experience to have the opportunity to pitch. It was my first time, and I was alongside some really incredibly talented CEOs working on amazing, innovative technologies. But I just tried to stay focused on sharing my passion for what we're building at Linshom and how we're truly making a difference in healthcare. I also need to shout out Ethel Rubin. She did a little bit of pitch coaching for me, and I have to say her constructive criticism was a huge contributor. I think I owe the win to Ethel. But it was great connecting with the audience and the judges and getting to share the impact that Linshom can make. Really, really amazing experience. I recommend anyone that can either present or attend the Crab Trap to certainly do so. And it was great. I was grateful that the judges were able to recognize Linshom's potential, and the visibility has been great. We certainly grew awareness of the company and the technology, and got some phone calls after the BHI Crab Trap win, and got a lot of new introductions for us. So we're really thankful to have had the opportunity.
Well, you did an excellent job. The judges basically seconded that. And hopefully, I don't know if your parents, it's a shame it wasn't videotaped, because I'm sure your parents would have loved to have seen that as well. Have you told them about it?
I did. And in fact, another shout out to Ethel. She actually snapped some pictures of me up there. So she said, "These are for your mother. She'll be proud of you." So I had the paparazzi on my tail.
Oh, that is great. And then, Ric, are you going to turn Talia loose to be one of your sales engineers in addition to just a development engineer?
Well, I presented the very next week at a similar competition in North Carolina and did not win. So I think it's very clear who should be taking the lead on these presentations from this point going forward.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Ethel Rubin. Ethel, for those who don't know, Ethel is the lead entrepreneur in residence at the National Institute of Health. And we have 13 people there now. And what they do is work with SBIR winners throughout the United States and actually do this. They do pitch coaching for a lot of the CEOs and entrepreneurs who are actually going to go to Resi or the JP Morgan conference or Bio or Resi or some of these other investment conferences and help them prepare their pitches and their decks for the investors. And for your benefit, Ethel came from Medtronic, so she came from the medical device industry. She knows the medical device industry well. And basically, she does have this mother attitude, Talia. So I'm sure that when in her coaching, she came across as sort of Mother Rubin working with Talia and the critiquing she was doing. Is that the way she came across for you?
Yes, yes. I definitely felt like she had my best interest at heart, and she gave great feedback, very constructive. A lot of things that I worked on, my pitch really improved. My initial pitch wouldn't have won it. So that with Ric's excellent slides. And then at the end of the day, it's really the technology that was outstanding. But all of those are really important factors that helped me.
Well, thank you to Ethel and yourself for a job well done. So, Ric, let's talk about the future a little bit. I think we talked a couple of years ago. You've made significant progress with the company. Let's talk about major milestones that you look forward to for Linshom over the next couple of years.
Sure. The first one I think is very near term, and that's to close the A round out. And we expect to do that between now and the end of the year or very early next year. Next is the go-to-market system, FDA clearance that I spoke about before. And this is this smaller version, more miniaturized version of the sensor within the full system, passing the electronics testing, the biocompatibility testing, gas pathways testing, all the requirements, the ISO requirements that FDA requires that you pass for our safety, because we're all patients too. So we're targeting that around second quarter, and then that puts us in a small limited market launch or a soft launch. So we're looking at like a third quarter 25 soft launch. We've got 5 sites hand selected, ready to go. 2 of those have completed or are currently doing clinical work for us. And the other 3 are very interested in getting their hands on this sooner than later. So we'll do that soft launch. We'll learn a ton in that soft launch. And then within that soft launch, we'll continue to collect data in what's called a registry format. So those 5 sites will still collect data, and then that'll just pour more data to Talia to analyze and distill down. And then we'll use that data to arm 1 or more national distributors. And we've been in discussions with a couple of these national distributors for 2 years now, who are also very interested in carrying this product. So that's really what happens between now and, say, the end of next year.
Well, that's great. And for those entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs listening to this BioTalk podcast, you can hear Ric talking about 6 years since he's been involved and actually get a product into the marketplace. So it takes a lot of patience and persistence to get to that stage, Ric, right?
It's not for the faint of heart.
Well, and you basically have got a good path forward. So congratulations on that. Is there anything that you or Talia would like to discuss that we haven't talked about that you think would be beneficial for the BioTalk listeners today?
For me, if you're in this business or considering getting into this type of business, whether it be startup or tech transfer out of a university, just understand that it's a long, long marathon. It takes years and years of hard work. And like a marathon runner, you have to be ready, condition, train, and then you just got to stick it out.
And then also assemble the right team to support you.
Correct. Absolutely.
How about you, Talia? How's this journey been, and what are you looking forward to in the future?
This has been great. So my last job was at a big company, and then I transitioned into the startup world, and I think I'll be here a while. I really like it. Typical software engineering job, I don't think you'd be invited onto a podcast. So you never know what's going to come up. But it's really exciting. It's fast paced. Like Ric said, just our sensor, for example, we started out of a little bit of a bulky sensor. Now it's lightweight, smaller than a dime. We're ready to have that done and get it to the FDA in 2025 and start bringing that to market. It's just really exciting and getting exposure to a lot more than a typical software engineer would. So it's really great, really rewarding, but it aligns with my interests. So it's very motivating to me. So I think you need to find the right balance of what you like technically and then also what you like just in terms of your own passions.
And having a nice partner like Ric to work with.
Absolutely.
Makes it a little bit easier. Yeah. So I want to congratulate both of you, and probably we'll come back in another 12 to 18 months with your launch, not your soft launch, your real launch. After that, national distributors there, and we're going to see the technology all over the United States. But I want to congratulate Ric Hughen, who's the CEO of Linshom Medical, and Talia Feldman, software engineer, also at Linshom, for being on BioTalk today. Congrats to the progress you're making, and we're anxious to follow the successes you're going to have in 2026. So thank you for being on BioTalk.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.